So, welcome to an absolutely fascinating conversation that we're going to be having with Emma Beswick, who is the founder of Lifecode Gx. Now, those of you who follow me on my social media will know that I tried very hard to do an Instagram live with Emma recently, talking about this extraordinary thing called Nutrigenomics. And alas, technology was against us that day, which in a way is better because it means that we can come here and record this specifically all about the nutrient core report and analysis and have a really good conversation about nutrigenetics and what this all is, the DNA testing that reveals so much about our genes and what goes on inside that we previously just wouldn't have been aware of. So before I introduce Emma to you, just a tiny bit of background here. I first discovered Lifecode Gx and their reports. This is my personal one, which I'm going to share with you. A few months ago, when my eldest daughter Lily was recommended to do this by a doctor who's treating her for mast cell activation syndrome, an autoimmune issue, and wanted her to have her histamine levels checked genetically. And that revealed so many interesting things that I decided that I wanted to write about this and cover it for my magazine, Earle Wellbeing. And so I would do it myself, and I felt perfectly fit and well. I wasn't expecting to find anything startling or different that I didn't really know. However, what was revealed was extraordinary, and it absolutely amazed me, which is why I'm doing this today, to share it with everybody else, because I since went on and did it for other members of the family, which has been so literally life-changing in many ways. And so welcome, Emma. I'm so delighted that we are going to be talking more about this. So would you like to just introduce yourself and just talk a little bit about your background and what exactly is Lifecode Gx, your company?
Yeah, thank you, Liz. And I'm really delighted to be here as well and have this opportunity because I can talk about this topic forever. So you might have to stop me towards the end. So my background is I worked for a lot of years in a corporate job, got very fed up of it and felt just a little bit stale. Had some quite big life events happen that made me just think I want to do something that I care about and feel really, really passionate about. And so I trained in nutrition. And as part of my training, I did a lecture or had a lecture on Nutrigenomics, which was very, very cutting edge then. It's still cutting edge, but it was very much so 8 years ago. And that led me to look at what tests were available, feel quite disappointed in what was out there, and then set up Lifecode Gx to really fill that gap. And to do something that was really, really good quality. Our tests are used by professionals, health professionals, and that was really, really practical and actionable. So yes, it could make a difference to people in their life.
Absolutely. And I can absolutely hold my hand up to that firsthand. So just to explain what I have learned about the DNA testing is how I think about it is that we have a set of genes that we're born with. We have our genes and they're the same whether we do this test, whether we are 6 years old or 106. The results will be exactly the same because our genes are our genes. So it doesn't matter at what stage of life you do this. And you touched on something very positive there, which is that although we're dealt this deck of cards, if you like, when we're born, which are our genes, how we play our hand, how we play those cards in real life is something that we can change. So this isn't like a DNA test that says, oh, really sorry, you've got some bad news. You've got this gene or you haven't got that gene. Bad luck. Everything that is talked about here is something that you can help to influence, whether it's taking more of a certain vitamin or less of something else or being aware of it. So overall, it's always very positive, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And even when you see red on the report, which I know we'll look at what that means, when you see red, there is always a solution. And often, depending on the perspective that you have on a certain gene and the context that you're looking at it in, there may be an upside as well as a downside anyway.
Good. So
It's
that is going to be
yeah.
some good news. So this is what we're going to talk about today. It's the basic nutrient core report. And in fact, if you go onto your website, you'll see that you can get tested for all sorts of different things. But this, I think, for me, and for anybody new to it, is really the kind of the starting off point. And what I love about this is that it gives so much information in one report. So it talks about food response. So this is looking at whether you are genetically gluten intolerant or lactose intolerant, how you react to caffeine, your microbiome diversity. You then go on and look at various specific nutrients and vitamins, vitamins A, B9, which is folate, B12, really important, vitamin C, D, never more so important or in the news than now, vitamin K, and something called glutathione, which is going to play a big part of this little broadcast because that's really fascinating. And then beyond that, you also look at factors of our metabolism, so how we respond to sugar, insulin response, fat, our appetite naturally, genetically, inflammation levels, blood pressure, and circadian rhythm. And that's all in our genes. So these are all things that are absolute, aren't they? There's no variables. Once you've done the test, this is it. You know for life what's going on with your genes.
Yeah, and you can go and revisit it at different stages in your life as well. I sometimes forget what my own results are, and then I'll think, oh, I want to go and have another look at that, just because something has triggered me to focus on that aspect of my health at a certain point in time. So
now, before we start talking about the report, and I thought the best way to do it would be to actually just share my own report. So I'm going to share that with the world. So you're going to know genetically what makes me tick. It's just about the practicalities of it, because it's a very simple test to take. You get sent a little kit in the post, and you have like a little mascara wand that you smudge inside your cheek to pick up some cells, post it off to you, and then you have that analyzed. And just to say, I know there's a lot of chat about safety with DNA. The data, it's all anonymized, it's entirely confidential. Can you just talk us through some of the reassurances there about the practical side of how it works logistically?
yeah, so the lab that tests the actual DNA, so where the sample is read, is in the UK. Everything we do is in the UK, so it is protected in that way. And the identity of you, the person, is only known by 2 employees in the company. So the lab get a barcode, and that is how we track the sample the whole way through. You are just a number, I'm afraid, by the time it gets to them. But it is entirely secure, and the lab actually destroy the sample after 3 months. So it's kept for that time, just in case we want to go back and do something else. And then it is just destroyed. And the same with your data that we have, that is destroyed after 6 months. So it's not shared with anyone apart from who you authorise it to be shared with. So you and your practitioner and the inner circle at Lifecode.
Okay, so there's nothing in terms of insurance issues or anything like that. And interesting that you get the sample destroyed after 3 months. That's quite interesting, and it's worth remembering that, because when we did the tests for my family, we did the basic tests, and that then showed that, oh, actually we quite like to look at something else, particularly with histamine. With midlife women, there's an estrogen test, which is absolutely fascinating, which you then might like to go on and do. So rather than have to redo the cheek sample, send it back in the post, wait for a few weeks for it to be processed, you can then run other reports should you want to, just within that 12-week window.
Yeah, absolutely. And we feel that's the nice balance between the protection and the security and the flexibility to add on. But usually people, if they get their results back, they're curious, and if they want to add on, they're going to make that decision quite quickly.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm quite sure of that. And just to say, obviously these tests aren't cheap. We're talking about several £100s, but it is the most extraordinary investment. It's certainly the most worthwhile investment that I think I've ever made in my health. And it will reveal what nutrients you might need or might not need. And it's interesting, isn't it, in this kind of pandemic time? I think the supplement manufacturers are actually doing really well as an industry, because everybody has become really aware of having to support their immune system perhaps a little bit more, maybe use vitamin D, maybe take other things. And, you know, you could be wasting your money. You might not need the things that you're taking. On the other hand, there might be things out there that are very cheap and easy that you definitely do need that you might not be aware of. So it's, for me, I think it's a really good investment. And I'm also very grateful that you have given the Earle Wellbeing community a great discount, which I'll talk about at the end if anybody is inspired and actually wants to take it, because you are giving us a nice hefty chunk off, which is much appreciated. Thank you.
You're very welcome. I think on the supplements, one just small thing I would say as well is that more is not necessarily better. So some people come along and they might be taking 20 different supplements, and as you say, they might not even need some of those. Yeah. But those supplements are still being processed by your body, by your liver, and so it's still putting demands on that system. So it's far more healthy to take the things that you do need and not kind of use up your resources to process the things that you don't.
Brilliant. Well, look, let's dive straight in. So as I said, the first group that you're testing for is for food responses, and lactose is the first one, and this reveals this green color. So talk us through the coding, because you'll see as I go through the report that there's green, amber and red. What do you mean by these?
So it is like a traffic light system, and on the whole, green means good, the best version of a gene. Yes, so you've got a good start there, Liz.
Yeah.
The amber, it means that there is a potential for that to be either too fast or too slow, but it's all on a scale, like a sliding scale, really. And then the red is further down or up the scale, at a more extreme end of that scale. And
so you might need to really
just grabbing attention.
Yeah, you're going to take some action perhaps if you've got amber or red. Okay, so for me, this says that I'm not lactose intolerant, so which is good, because I love my dairy, I love cheese, so that's all good. And the gene here, you list that the gene type, it's got a little row of numbers, and it's got AA here. What's that meaning, the AA?
So those are the two letters that you have inherited, so one from each parent. So that means both your parents had at least one letter A themselves. And for lactose tolerance, you only need one of the good alleles, they're called, these letters. So you need one good letter to tolerate lactose, to make those enzymes to break it down. Yeah.
So that means, looking at my test, I can say to my parents, neither of you are lactose intolerant, because I would have had to have got that AA genetic code from them. So as a family, we're fine. And then I actually went on and found that my children were fine too. Is that because I've then donated those AA genes to them?
Yeah, so you will have donated at least one A, because they can't have any alternative from you. And even if their father has the alternate one, the A overrides the weak allele in this case.
So from this alone, you know, that's actually great value, because I know that all 5 of my children and my parents, as a group, we are all absolutely fine when it comes to lactose intolerance. And that was really interesting, I have to say, for my eldest son, who's talked about being lactose intolerant before. He has digestive issues, and he's always believed that he had issues with dairy. And he was really surprised when he got this, because he still has ongoing issues, but we know that it's not due to the lactose. So that means that we can now investigate something else that is causing the problem for him. I don't know, you know, whether it's the casein or whether it's, you know, something else or something in his microbiome, but it's not lactose.
Exactly. So it's good to rule it out as well as rule it in. And there are quite a few examples of that, actually. It's kind of okay, look elsewhere. So as you say, it could still be the dairy, because it could be casein, another protein in the dairy, but we know it's not lactose. So that's
not
one
lactose
thing ruled out. Yeah.
Good. So we started off with a big tick. Then we come to the next one, which is celiac disease. So really looking at gluten. This is a bit different, isn't it? I'm showing some amber here on these various different tests. What is this indicating?
So different genes and different variances have different risk associated with them. So even though this is amber, it's still a very, very low risk of developing celiac disease.
Right.
However, you could be more likely to have some sensitivity to gluten.
Okay.
Again, this isn't a diagnostic in terms of things like celiac disease, but it's a possibility that you could get celiac disease. Whereas if it was green, it would be like 1 in a million people with celiac disease has a green result for this. So the risk is low, but then you might have that sensitivity. And
yeah, which
especially
is
if you're
true,
eating
actually. Yeah, I
Okay.
mean, I do notice that if I eat a lot of wheat products, especially refined wheat, white bread or pasta, I tend to get quite puffy around the eyes. I tend to feel a bit sluggish. And as a result, over the years, especially writing about gut health, I've definitely switched my bread choices to things like spelt, sourdough, which I find I can digest and tolerate much more quickly and easily. Is that something that you would expect from somebody with that result?
Yeah, I mean, it is about what accompanies the gluten as well and the quality of the food that you're eating. So if you're eating a lot of processed food that contains gluten, then that's all going to potentially cause irritation and inflammation in the gut anyway. And the two together, it's kind of you creating potentially that environment that is setting you up to start to react to the gliadin in the gluten anyway. So
Right.
by eating the good stuff, you are more likely to
Yeah.
not get that sort of response.
And it's
So
interesting because I do always have the sourdough made with the sort of the older, more ancient type of grains. And my father was here a year or so ago, and he was making some toast for breakfast, and he just made a remark. He said, whenever I come and see you and I eat your bread or your toast, I don't get indigestion. I don't get that bloated feeling. And I said, aha, that is because normally he would eat perhaps quite highly processed white bread, and now by eating a sourdough and also potentially looking at this, I need to get him tested because these genes, I will have got this slight intolerance or imbalance from one of my parents, and it could well be that he has a bigger issue perhaps with
yeah,
gluten.
yeah. And also these genes, the same genes are a general autoimmune risk factor. So of course
Right.
celiac disease is an autoimmune disease,
Yeah.
and these same genes, it can, as if the risk is there generally to respond or react from an immune system perspective to things in a way that you shouldn't, that your system
Right.
is kind of making little mistakes. It's kind of like, oh, actually I should recognize that that is not harmful, but instead it's responding to certain environmental things in a way as if it is the enemy, and creating this kind of inflammatory immune response.
Mm,
So it doesn't
yeah.
have to go in the direction of celiac disease. It could go in and show itself in other ways.
That is so interesting. So we know that by showing that genetic structure, that you are putting your body more at risk perhaps of inflammation or other areas of discord, if you like, by eating a lot of gluten. So being able to take
Yeah,
steps to avoid that, and it's certainly been very helpful for me. It doesn't mean that I never eat gluten, it just means that I am aware of it and I'm quite careful with my choices.
exactly that. And I think what we're not trying to do is prevent people enjoying the things that they love, and take things away. It's actually the opposite. It's understanding what to
Yeah.
look out for. And, again, this isn't just a black, white, on, off scenario. It is all about amount and the amount of stress or pressure that you can put certain parts of
Right.
your system under.
Yeah. And certainly we need to be reducing the pressure on our systems right now. So moving on, the next thing you test for is microbiome diversity. I'm very pleased that as the writer of gut books, that I've come up with a green for this one. But there's an amber there as well. So I've got double A here, which says good diversity. The genotype is showing that I'm more likely to have bifidobacterium in the gut, which is beneficial. And then here it's kind of going amber, it's an A and a G. So how would we interpret this? What's going on in my gut?
So luckily for you, this is a bit like the lactose in that the A is the dominant allele. So you only need the A in order to have the benefit of the predisposition to have more diverse microbiome. And as you know, the more diversity is a good thing.
Yeah.
So again, it's a good result. Even though it's yellow, we're just showing that because there are those two letters. And so I think that is of interest, as you've seen, when you're thinking about your family as well, and the different generations and how that may have been transferred between you. But it's good news. It's very good news. And we all know now that the microbiome is so important.
Yeah.
And
what's good about these reports is that you do talk about, you've got some nutritional advice here. So it's talking about all the things that I love: kimchi, sauerkraut, kefir, encouraging good bacteria so that your microbiome can flourish. But then also the things that will have a negative impact, like antibiotics, obviously, NSAIDs drugs, the non-steroidal anti-inflammatories like ibuprofen, Nurofen, and things like that have a negative effect on microbiome. So, being aware of the positive and also the negative is important, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of people don't realise that, taking an ibuprofen might be so detrimental on your gut health. And we can talk about nutrients and supplements and, forever, but if your gut health isn't good enough to absorb them, then again, you might not be really spending your money on the priority. The priority could be getting your gut health right up there and healthy. So
yeah, really, really interesting. Now, the next one, talking about food focuses, this is caffeine. And I got mixed results. I've got an amber and a green. Why do you split out the caffeine in these two ways here with these two genes?
So the first one, the Adora 2A gene, I just kind of love that word, Adora, is a receptor. Gene. And so this is about how Adora, it's about how sensitive you are to the caffeine. So it's how the caffeine exerts its stimulatory effects. And so I think of this as a bit like the vertical, like how strong is that stimuli? And then the other one is more like the horizontal. How long does that last?
Okay. So now I love a nice strong cup of coffee in the morning. First thing, it is my fix. I have to say, my guilty pleasure is a nice strong cup of coffee. And I do find that it has an impact on me. Is that showing up here in my genes?
Yeah, that is your Adora 2A gene, your receptor. And at the end of the day, why do we drink caffeine? It's exactly for that reason. Yeah. We want that lift. So, you have a slightly increased sensitivity to the caffeine, which you might actually derive a little bit more pleasure from it.
That's why I love my coffee. It's really giving me that little boost.
It away.
Good.
We're not taking it away.
I don't think you need to, because I've got this one. So this one, you were talking about the flat line of how long that lasts. Is this good? Does this mean that I'm processing it well?
Yeah, you've got the best gene for processing that caffeine. Whoa.
And interestingly, so my ex-husband, who's half Italian, loves his strong coffee. You try and prize an Italian away from their espressos and you'll be in trouble. And he has always had trouble sleeping. So when he did this test, it showed that actually, I think he might even have been red down here. He is not... He's really sensitive to it. He loves it, but he's super sensitive. So as a result of this, he now doesn't drink coffee beyond lunchtime because it stays in his system for so much longer than it would for somebody who had a different genetic structure. So he now, as a result of that, sleeps much better simply by knowing how you're processing genetically, how you're processing the caffeine.
That's so interesting. And I think also some people, he probably did know that kind of, but he didn't want to really acknowledge
Typical
it.
bloke who's just saying, actually, I just love my coffee, so that's it. I'm just going to deal with it. But it also explains why some people, I guess, can drink coffee after dinner and, it has no effect. And, I always say, oh my goodness, I'll just have a herb tea or maybe some decaf or whatever later in the evening. And they say, oh, well, I it has no effect on me. And that's due to what's going on in their genes. They just happen to have that way of processing it.
Yeah, I mean, I still think that even if you have the best version, if you have an after dinner espresso, it's probably going to affect you.
Hasn't it?
And
got to somewhere.
Yeah. And they still offer that in restaurants, don't they? It's still a normal kind of.
Yes. Would you like an espresso at like 10 o'clock in the evening? No, I wouldn't. Thank you. Now, okay, moving on to the first of the vitamins. And this is vitamin A, retinol. Oh dear, we're beginning to go down the slippery slope here. I've got two ambers. Let's talk about what's going on with retinol.
So there are two forms of vitamin A, at least in this context. So there is pre-vitamin A, which is in vegetables. So when we think about beta carotene and carrots, although there are many other foods that have beta carotene in, that is the pre-vitamin A. So although that has some functions, the real biological benefit of vitamin A is in retinol, which is in animal sources of food. And you can convert one to the other. So this gene enables you to convert the vegetable pre-vitamin into the active retinol.
However, I'm not doing that very well. I'm not really converting my beta carotene that I'm getting because I eat a lot of veggies and, brightly coloured fruits and all of that, full of beta carotene. So for me to get retinol, because I'm not able to convert it, I need to eat it. So for me, that or anybody with this, or even if you've got red, I would need to have animal produce, meat or fish, eggs, dairy, because that's the source of the fat-soluble actual retinol. That's really interesting because I can tell from this that I would be a hopeless vegan because I'm not converting my beta carotene. And I think a lot of people, who are going more plant-based or thinking, well, that's fine, I don't need to worry about vitamin A because I'm eating all my vegetables, I'm getting loads of beta carotene, my body's going to convert that to retinol, that's fine, job done. However, they may well not have the genes that are going to do that conversion for them. So how common is it for people to not be able to convert beta carotene to retinol?
It's very common. So it's about 30% of people have got these variances. So that is very common.
That's a significant finding. If you're saying that, you're then saying that around a third of all vegans are not getting their retinol. They may think that they're eating lots of healthy leafy greens, which is great, but they're not getting their retinol. And of course, that's so crucial for eyesight, for everything from immune system to even your skin and your hair, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, there is a way around that. And if you want to be vegan, you can get around this by supplementing. So again, there is an answer, but it might not just be a healthy lifestyle you think it is. And certainly for some people.
So you would need to take a synthetic form to actually get that. And this is something that doesn't happen overnight, is it? Because vitamin A is a fat-soluble vitamin, so we tend to store it. So people who have, gone plant-based, for example, and may feel brilliant the first few weeks or months, it could be quite a long time down the line, couldn't it, when their vitamin A supplies actually run out and they start to then feel not quite so well.
Absolutely. So it can be really difficult to make that connection between that change in lifestyle, that change in diet, because as you say, you might feel brilliant, and then it's only months later you start to kind of notice your hair falling out or your skin maybe not being as vibrant. And it could be because your vitamin A has depleted by then.
And you're not able to top it up with the
Yeah,
natural, normal
yeah,
conversion process that
yeah,
2/3 of the rest of the
yeah,
population might be able to do. So
absolutely.
fascinating. I mean, that is, for me, I do eat a lot of meat and dairy and fish and things and eggs, so that's going to be okay. It's not such a worry. But if I didn't, this report would definitely tell me that I would need to do something about it.
Yeah, absolutely. There is a condition as well that is slightly amusing in some ways. If you're not making this conversion and you're eating a lot of beta carotene foods, you can actually turn orange. So,
Really?
yeah,
So that's why some people do turn orange. I have heard that, and that's because you're not converting it properly.
yeah, yeah. It's kind of
Oh,
stuck at the
interesting.
beginning of the pipe and it's not going anywhere. And so you can have yellow whites of your eye. And people associate that with liver damage or problems, but it may be that you've just got too much beta carotene and the palms of your hands might also turn orange. So, yeah, that's quite
Fascinating and really
extreme.
well, but really useful for doctors and GPs to know about things like this, isn't it? When they're seeing patients, coming in,
Yeah,
to talk about diet. Very often doctors don't have a huge amount of nutritional training or knowledge, perhaps, but these basic things to do with daily diet. Now, moving on here, we're going on to the B vitamins.
very
I'm kind
important.
of a bit good and a bit not so good. What is this talking about? What are you looking at particularly with the B vitamins?
So, two B vitamins on here. There's B12, which again is a animal sourced vitamin, and you have got a good result for the transporter. So that's the TCN2, and it carries the B12 into cells.
Yep.
So that's the best version of the gene for that.
Oh,
And
good.
the other one, the FUT2, you've got a mix, and this is
Yeah.
associated with a slightly less good absorption. So this is gut
Yeah.
absorption of B12. Um,
Right.
so you
So
can
I'm
absorb it.
transporting it. I'm transporting it around the body with these genes, but once it gets to the gut, my gut is not absorbing it very well.
Yeah. So if you solve the first step, which is getting enough B12 in, then once it's in your system, it should be able to get to the places within your body that it needs to be. But it's just
Right.
that getting it in there. So that is again linked to the gut health. And it shows that although we can look at these genes one at a time, we still also need to make connections between
Right.
our bigger picture
Yeah.
aspects of health as well.
Yeah.
Um,
Certainly my children were shown to be amber down here. So I have given them more B12. And again, that's a really important thing for people who aren't eating much meat or dairy, because B12. And again, B12 is one of those vitamins which I've been aware of for a while, the importance of it. And we've written a lot about it in the magazine. And through talking to various doctors about it, it can take up to 4 years before a sign of B12 deficiency is really obvious and your health is really going downhill. And of course, if you stop eating those certain animal based foods, you are maybe not going to connect that 3 or 4 years down the line with your poor health. You're going to think, well, I've always eaten like this. I felt fine. I've been eating like this for years. My poor health must be due to something else. But actually, you've run out of B12 and your body's not processing it anymore.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And there are some other things that can deplete B12 quite suddenly, actually. So, anesthetic. So, if you go into
Really?
hospital, yeah, if you have surgery and you have anesthesia, that can really zap your B12. So, I think everybody should
Why
have
don't they tell
B12.
us that? Yeah, I mean, it
And
should
then
be
we
like
can
on the
just take
checklist. If you're going in for an operation, particularly if it's planned, it should be on the checklist, shouldn't it? The anaesthetists and the doctors should be saying, oh, by the way, for a little bit of time before and afterwards, however long the research says, you're going to need to up your B12 levels.
Yeah, absolutely. And even worse, if you have the genes that show you a kind of vulnerability there,
Right.
You know, so some people might be able to kind of get by and they get home and they eat their meat or whatever and they replenish that really quickly. But
Yeah.
other people are not going to be so lucky. Yeah. Why don't
That
they
is
tell us?
just so interesting. Oh my goodness, this is just opening up a whole new world of health and well-being. So moving on from vitamin B, we move on to vitamin C. I don't think I have any issues. So I would suggest that I don't particularly need to supplement with vitamin C. I also eat lots of fruit and veg. Although there are some schools of thought that suggest that we should actually be taking much, much more than we think we might need, but that's a whole other story. But certainly genetically, for me, that's not
Yeah.
an issue.
Yeah.
And do
Yeah.
you
So
see
this
that
is about,
is that quite common?
it's less common to have variants on this. However, it's about how your kidneys filter out the vitamin C. So for some people, it is overzealous really in that filtering. And even if they take high dose vitamin C, it's going to be very, very rapidly kind of filtered out. But you don't have to worry about that.
Right.
I think the message is, though, we still need all that lovely sources of vitamin
Yeah,
C, the
yeah,
lovely fruits and veg.
definitely, definitely. Now we come on to something that is quite topical, and that's vitamin D. And again, I've personally got quite a mixed bag here. What's going on with these three different genes when it comes to vitamin D analysis?
So the good news, first of all, is the transport of vitamin D. So the GC gene codes for a protein that carries the vitamin D through your bloodstream. And I think of it as a bit like a taxi, and it's good at doing that. Whereas some people have got a taxi where the windows are down and the tyres are flat and the vitamin D is kind of
Okay,
in
struggling
danger
to
of.
get there.
Yeah, exactly. So that's good from that transport perspective, and that has the biggest impact on your vitamin D status. So when you do a vitamin D test, it's like, how much have I got? As long as you've got good exposure to sunlight, and again, you're eating these foods like oily fish and eggs that are good sources of vitamin D, you should be able to achieve a reasonable level. You probably still benefit from some supplementation in
Is
this
that because
country.
it's not being processed as well here? That's what the yellow is showing.
So the yellow is your response to vitamin D. It's almost as if the vitamin D is a messenger. It's someone who's given you an instruction, and it's how clearly you hear that. How loud
Right.
is that vitamin D instruction? How good is your hearing? And it's as if your hearing is dialed down a little bit. So you need your vitamin D to be at a higher level.
Right. And certainly since getting this test, I do take a bit more vitamin D than the recommended daily amount, just because I know that I'm not having that absorption as effectively as somebody else. And something that Brella, my youngest daughter, has said that it's fine for me to share here because she's talked about it before, is she has a long time had anxiety and low mood and issues with sleeping. And when she did this test, because Lily obviously started it in the family, we were fascinated by it. I did it. I was fascinated. And I thought, my goodness, let's see what else is going on. When her report came back, she was red all the way through. So she was not transporting it. She was not absorbing it. And
Yeah.
as a result of that, she's now taking very high strength vitamin D. And I can tell you, and she has talked about this on my Instagram, that literally within 48 hours, her entire mood changed. Anxiety lifted, sleeps really well. And of course, in terms of bone health, we know that we need vitamin D for bone health. So, in some ways, as her mother, when I saw that, I felt I was in two minds. In one way, I was delighted that we discovered it so I could give her these extra vitamin D supplements, which is really cheap and really easy and really safe and really effective, as it turns out, but also devastated that I hadn't known that. And she'd had endured years of anxiety and low mood and poor sleep when she could have fixed it so easily.
It's so, I mean, it is such a shame that everybody can't just do this and know
Yeah.
right from the beginning, isn't
And
it?
be told, because, I could have had it tested as a small child and
Yeah.
known right from the beginning that that was it. However, having said that, it's never too late, is it? I remember you were telling me about a lady in her 60s who came to you because she'd had low mood, depression, even bouts of suicidal thoughts, and was having a lot of problems with bone fractures. And when she did the test, again, she showed red all the way through. So she was able to take high strength vitamin D and immediately feels so much better. But just how tragic that she, lived 60 plus years of her life with that. And of course, the bone health is irreversible by that age.
hmm So, yeah, and it's so easy to fix. And,
Yeah,
if you think of just about mood, so we need the vitamin D to help make serotonin, like our happy neurotransmitter. And how many people end up going down the antidepressant route when
yeah,
actually they could just check their vitamin D or understand
yeah,
their genetics and know that that for them is the thing that is worth the investment as far as a supplement is concerned.
mm,
And, if nothing else, that is your top supplement and keep on it because
yeah.
it'll make you feel good and it'll protect
And
you into older age and everything.
and we know, it's linked with the immune system, and I think that's what's really interesting about your reports is that they do include, certainly in the package that we have with you, the 30-minute consultation with a nutritional therapist afterwards to really drill down and explain how all the pathways work. So vitamin D, we might think of, oh, it just, makes you feel good, it's part of your immune system, which is really good for your immune response. But actually looking at that conversion and how it interrelates with serotonin and dopamine and GABA and these, happy chemicals in the brain, you realize just how fundamental it is and how important. And I think with all of us under this enormous cloud of gloom at the moment, anything that we can do that will help to lift us safely and easily and effectively
Yeah.
and cheaply. I mean, you're ticking so many boxes, aren't you?
Yeah, and I think with vitamin D, we all know that sunlight makes us feel better, and it's because it's helping our body make the vitamin D
Yeah,
and those happy chemicals, as you say. But
yeah,
yeah, it's such a small thing that can have such a dramatic benefit.
yeah.
It is
Amazing.
wonderful.
So moving on from vitamin D, we go to vitamin K. Don't really hear very much about vitamin K. I should probably be a little bit more aware of it because I'm amber. What's this telling us?
So, vitamin K helps with coagulation of blood. So, um, if you find yourself noticing bruises and you're kind of like, don't remember knocking myself, don't remember that,
Yeah,
and particularly on places where your skin might be thinner, like your forearms, then that's an indication that your vitamin K might be low. You're bleeding
interesting.
more easily, your blood is thinner. And if you have a variance on this gene, then that can make that more likely. Um,
Mm,
and it basically means the fix is to eat lots of nice dark green leafy veg
great.
that is
Yeah,
rich in vitamin K. Um,
fantastic. So easy fix for that. And I've noticed actually some of the vitamin D supplements are also fortified with vitamin K. So
yeah.
that's another way. But interesting you say that because I hadn't really thought about it before, but I do bruise quite easily, especially where I can
Mm,
see them, like on my forearms.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
So next time you
fascinating.
notice that, because it probably is variable, there's certain times of the year when we eat certain things more, and it might just be like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm just not really eating much of that at the moment.
Yeah, really
So
fascinating. Okay, so going on from vitamin K, right. Okay, guys, here we go. This is getting into the heavy stuff now. My first lot of red, and this is glutathione, which, to be honest with you, I really didn't know very much about at all. Our body naturally produces it, doesn't it? We make it from vitamin C. So our body normally just kind of gets on with converting it, which is why you don't really think about it as a supplement to take, because our body's supposed to make it. However, my body is not making it. Is that what this is telling us?
Yeah, so glutathione, and to be honest, I don't think I'd heard of it before I did my nutrition training either. It's, you know, we've heard of vitamin C and E and all those things, but glutathione, it is the master antioxidant. So most people are familiar with an antioxidant, and the vitamin C being the top example, really. And basically, it's neutralizing little toxins within the body that are potentially going to ricochet around and chip away and cause bits of damage, and it's kind of hoovering those up. So it is really, really important, because we're all exposed to toxins, environmental toxins, or even things that our own body makes. So like stress molecules, stress chemicals.
Yeah.
So, you know, in these times, we've all got some underlying stress that is more than it usually is.
Yeah.
And so it's important that we're mopping up the kind of products of that stress.
Yeah. So how have I survived without that gene? Because I've obviously not been able to make glutathione. Have I just been running on my vitamin C and all my other bits and pieces?
So the glutathione genes, there are a family of them. So although this is like the big family, kind of important lead of the family, if you will, there are others that also complement it. And I think of this as you've got one member of the family who's not really pulling their weight, or they've gone AWOL, but the other family members can kind of make up for that if they are given a bit more support. So the support that they need, and it's very, very, very well evidenced. There's an awful lot of research about this, that actually taking more glutathione, eating more glutathione foods, or taking a supplement almost gives those other family members more energy to make up for the lacker one.
This is really interesting, because when I got this report, you know, I got to this first bit, and you know, I was really quite shocked, and so I rushed out and I went and bought some glutathione. And that night I took a capsule of glutathione, and I woke up in the morning, and it wasn't that long ago, so you know, things were really quite stressful, and I hadn't had a particularly good night's sleep, but I felt amazing. I felt really energized. I felt like somebody put new batteries in me, and it was immediate. It was literally, I took the glutathione in the evening, and I woke up bright. And I don't normally, I'm not a morning person. I don't normally wake up feeling, you know, in tip top shape. And since then, I have taken glutathione, and I do feel really well. And you know, it wasn't that I wasn't feeling well before. You know, I was feeling good, you know, feeling like 8 out of 10 maybe. No real issues. And you know, when I did this report, I did it for research. I didn't do it because I was feeling that I needed to. And yet I wasn't aware of how much better I could feel by just adding in something simple that, you know, according to my own genes here, I needed to have. And it's something that I will take forever. Since testing other members of my family, my children are all blocking glutathione. They all came back red.
Yeah, and it is quite common. And so, you know, how many of us would have a similar positive experience if we knew that we needed more glutathione and we just go and buy some? It's quite simple.
You could just try it, couldn't you? Without even doing the test. Just get some glutathione. It's not doing any harm. Follow the, you know, the dosage on the pack. Take one and see what happens when you wake up in the morning.
And it is something, because it is this master kind of universal antioxidant. So it works all over. It's body and brain. So, you know, that clear-headedness and almost also calming a too busy brain sometimes. It can have that effect. So, if you've got a nail biter or someone who's quite fidgety, then actually glutathione can provide that salve. And it's kind of your brain that is controlling that behaviour, and it's just kind of solving and calming and soothing that whole system.
And we could surely all do with a bit of that right now, I have to say. And there's so much in this that is just so extraordinary. That's the first half of the report, talking about food and nutrients. There's a whole other section, which I think we ought to come back to in a separate episode, because that's getting into all the lifestyle factors of our metabolism, huge areas like inflammation. I mean, we could do a whole, broadcast just on inflammation, but things like circadian rhythms and appetite and how we respond to sugars and fats and insulin and all of that, which again is all, predisposed within our genes. It is just an extraordinary thing. I'm so grateful that we have connected, and that people can come and find this. I do recommend going to have a look. I should say I'm not paid. This is not an ad, by the way. But your website, lifecodegx.com, has got so much about it. And since becoming interested, there are all sorts of other reports that you can do. So there's the histamine, which I mentioned, which Lily has done, which can lead to autoimmune issues and histamine sensitivity. There's this one here, which I'd love to go through with you one day, because it's fascinating for midlife women. It's all about your estrogen balance and all the different types of estrogens and the pathways and how that is processed. And oh my goodness, you do need to have your thinking hat on with that one, because there are things in here that I've never heard of. It is quite a deep dive, but you do lots of interesting webinars, don't you, that you can just log on to and join to learn a little bit more about it.
So whatever the topic is that interests you, because we've all got, when you start to think about your own health, it's just different for all of us. What are our weaker points? What are the things that niggle away at us? So we've got a library of free webinars that are just short snapshots into certain topics, like histamine and estrogen.
And alcohol, so how we respond to alcohol, which is a really interesting one. Some people can process it better than others. It's really useful to know that, and the things that you can do about it. Frankly, to stop all kinds of things, from occurring later in life, can have a serious health impact. So for people who want to know more, it's lifecodegx.com. You put the special package together for my audience, for which I'm extremely grateful. So we go to lifecodegx.com/Liz Earle to find that. And it's an exclusive thing for us. It gives you your testing kit that comes through the post. It gives you your results that come like this in a chart, just like mine here, the Nutrient Core Report. And then crucially, it gives you half an hour of a one-to-one time with a nutritional therapist who's qualified to explain exactly what it all means. Because although the green, the amber and the red, is relatively straightforward, you then want to know, what can I do about it? How much should I be taking? Should I be using this version of a supplement or not? So it's really important, isn't it, to have that follow-up. So it's great that you've organised that with therapists that are accredited to you. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. So all our therapists are qualified and registered with an organisation called BANT, which is the British Association of Nutritional Therapists, and insured and all of that. And they've all done training with Lifecode as well. And I do really think that is vital. We do not want people looking at a report and seeing something red and getting worried about it. That is not the objective of this. It's supposed to feel empowering and enabling and be positive.
Absolutely. And as you said right at the beginning, even if it came up all red, these are all things that we can fix. They're things that we can do something about. So it's, in a way, there's no bad news. There's news, and then there's tools to help fix it. I should say, by the way, if you go onto the website and you put in that URL, lifecodegx.com/Liz Earle, and if you then buy the core report, then you need to put the Liz Loves, which is our standard offer code, in the offer box, and then that gives you your discount, which we really appreciate. Emma, will you come back and can we do the next half? Because I'm going to be so fascinated to talk more about things like metabolism, inflammation, circadian rhythms,
Yeah,
all of those things, which these reports reveal. Can we do
I'd
that
love
next time?
to. Yeah, love to. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
My
Thank you.
pleasure.
And I think what's going to be so interesting, and for those of you who have followed me for a while and heard me talk about this, I know lots of you are getting the test, and it's going to be really interesting in the next few weeks, months, to hear the feedback of what people's results are. If anybody wants to share, you can leave comments below here. You can, share your experiences and, what you've done about it and how it's helped to just, in some cases, totally transform lives, as I know that from my own family, from my own children, and from myself as well. So I'm very excited about the future. I do feel that the future is bright. And thank you. I wish you huge success with your company and everything that you're doing there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.